Welcome to LifeBlood. This is George G, and the time is right. Welcome to today's guest, strong and powerful Drew White. Drew, are you ready to do this?
I am ready, man.
All right, let's go. Drew is an entrepreneur. He's a questioner of antiquated systems, a lover of family, finances, and fun. He's a former pediatric oncology nurse turned modern wealth consultant focused on infinite banking. Drew, tell us a little bit about your personal life, some more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Yeah, from Omaha, Nebraska, born and raised. Have a wife, two kids, and yeah, I started out as a pediatric oncology nurse, as you mentioned. Graduated with about $150,000 plus in student loan debt, and as a nurse, I think I was making like 35,000 a year when I first graduated, and I was like,
Hmm.
these numbers, they don't really add up, right? And I remember like sitting down with my dad, and he doesn't have a background in finance, but he knew a little Dave Ramsey, and sitting down with him, and so we're looking at the numbers, and it's like, wait a second, half of what I make is going to pay off what I just did to myself, And so that I go back to that story because that's really what kickstarted my financial journey. I'd never really thought about money, just wasn't on my radar. And from there, I just had this passion and just started like reading everything I could. And it was a process. It's not like it was overnight. I learned everything I could about money. It was like a 10-year journey, and I've flipped mobile homes and then found my way to this infinite banking, which we can talk about. And so that's just it kind of kick started with that debt journey, and then really reading more and like, hey, what are other wealthy people doing? I did the Dave Ramsey Gazelle, get out of debt. But then for me, the issue was like, wait, I'm at zero now. How do I, what do I do? I don't know what to do now, And so that's really where I kept, that thirst for knowledge just kept going. And that's how I found my way to doing the, eventually kind of found my way to modern wealth consultant was through listening to podcasts, reading the book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and I always knew I had this kind of passion to teach others about money. And so, it's something my wife and I do, and I just became really passionate about it.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. Is pediatric oncology, is that cancer for kids?
It is. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep. So, yeah. And I also, and here in Nebraska, we have Nebraska medicine is one of like I haven't worked there for years, but they're they're world renowned for doing liver, small bowel, pancreas transplants. So I also took care of a lot of kids in that area, but a lot of oncology as well. And and it was one of those things. I became a nurse, and I realized pretty quick into it, like, you know what, this isn't for me forever. Because I knew like I'm gonna have a family someday, and I just the weekends, the holidays, the pay. And so I loved my time doing it. I met a lot of amazing people and actually became friends with some of the people that I took care of their kids. And but once you have kids, it's a nurse told me once you have kids, she's like, you're a great nurse, you're already very compassionate. She's like, but you're gonna realize you can't do this forever. And she was totally right. I was like, no, but no, once I had kids, it was like, no, I can't. You just start worst case scenarioing when they scrape their arm, So it was that, but I learned a lot and met a lot of awesome people in that career.
Yeah. Interesting. That I've got just immense all the respect in the world for Dave Ramsey. I think he's probably the most important financial person in the world. I'd never really thought about it, how sort of you get to the pinnacle of I'm now debt free.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then you start educating yourself, and you
Yeah.
go and you're flipping mobile homes, which is amazing but random, right?
Yeah, very random. Yes.
And then you stumble onto or come across this infinite banking. What is it about the infinite banking that has held your attention differently than other things have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's, and for me, for a little bit, it took a while to like kind of wrap my mind around it. Because like you mentioned, I have background from Dave Ramsey, I've discussed, and Dave's not a huge fan of whole life insurance, and it is using whole life insurance. But what really kind of struck me is this idea of, basically creating your own banking system, where right now, banks take our money, right? and they go make more money with it. And then they kick us back a 0.1, 0.2%, which is really nice of them when they're making like 6 to 10% on our money. And so we're basically loaning them our money when we put it in and when we deposit into their system. And so when I started reading up on this, it's like, wait a second, I can, kind of stop feeding the beast of these banks and have my own system that has lots of tax-free guaranteed growth. But I can also leverage that and use it to go do real estate, to go, buy businesses or, invest in crypto if you're into crypto. And so they're just, and just having that control over my money, especially after where I came from with this debt, I really liked that idea of being in control of my own money supply. And then I really connected with just the founder of the idea, Nelson Nash, just a really like quality person. He's since passed, but he was very much about, a blessed man leaves an inheritance, for the next generation, basically. And so, and I kind of botched the quote, but that's, basically what he would say. And so he was really into generational wealth transfer and making sure of taking care of the next generation. And so I connected a lot with his message as well. So there were multiple nuances, but it was like, it's like one of those things where, I don't know if you've ever had that. I'm reading the book and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is like what I want to do. This makes so much sense. And it's just like, so, but I don't know if that answers fully, but
for sure. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
It strikes me that we're at a time right now where we are questioning so many different things, and we're talking a lot about decentralization, and in a lot of ways, infinite banking has been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. Which is, also why I'm a fan of Bitcoin, which, we could get into, but yeah, I completely agree. It is a way of, taking back control of your own money supply. And, and a lot of people just don't realize that what banks are doing. Like, I never thought about that. I never thought, what's the bank do when I give them my money, right? Or when I just assumed it's sitting there, right? We're just like, yeah, it's sitting there waiting for me. And then it's like, as I started to ask questions, like you said, we're in this time of kind of questioning. It's like, wait a second, why do sometimes when I want to take a large amount of my money, do I have to ask permission to do that? Like, it's my money. And so that's another thing that, drew me to the infinite banking. It's like, I call up the insurance company and I say, I want the money. And they say, well, how fast do you want it and where? And they don't say, give me your dog's medical records and all of these things that you have to give the bank when you want to do anything with money, and what are you going to use the money for? And so, yeah, definitely, like, questions are really what led me there. Like you said, it's really how I got to this point.
So there's a big benefit on interest, certainly, but also taxes. And I don't know what's going on in Nebraska with taxes, but if you happen to be living in California or some other states, when they're talking about increasing taxes by a substantial amount, this is also going to be a beneficial thing from an infinite banking standpoint, from a tax perspective.
Yeah. It's like, in terms of funding it and things like that, it's like Roth, right? You pay, you basically, you've already paid your tax on the money that's going in. It's not going to be taxed again. And so, like, it's very similar in that structure. The growth in it, we talk about that 4% tax-free guaranteed that goes on in a whole life contract. And there was some law changes. Some of them are at 3% right now. Typically it was 4% plus dividends. If you have someone structured the correct way, that can all be tax-free guaranteed growth. And then when you take that loan on the policy, also, you're not taxed on the money. It doesn't count as income. And then there's ways to structure it when you loan it. Like if you have a business or real estate, when you loan it to yourself, you can structure a loan repayment system back to yourself that can be very tax beneficial as well. And then, yeah, the death benefit is that's the part that we don't focus as much on, the insurance part, but that is a part of it. And when that death benefit gets paid out someday, well, it's tax-free as well. And so, yeah, there really is a big component. And I don't know, I'm assuming most in your audience, and you would probably agree, most people think taxes are probably going up in the future. And so anything we can do to protect ourselves from that, the better, and add another tool to our tool belt.
Yeah. I think it's such the benefits to permanent life insurance, specifically in this example, whole life insurance, are great. Like, why wouldn't I want to do that? But I then look at it and say, okay, well, we need to make sure that all the different aspects of my financial life are taken care of, because the thing wants premium every month, right?
Mhm.
So how do you talk to people about that?
Yeah, I think, the one thing is we provide coaching. And so each person's situation is different. So we never say, hey, here's, you got to put X in and do this. So we always come up with a plan that, they're comfortable with. And they can do monthly, they can do annually. Like I fund mine annually because I get a little bit better rate for that. The other thing we talk about is looking at those premiums more like a deposit, because we're talking about it as a banking system instead of like, oh, this is a payment I have to make, because that's still money you're going to use. And it's just basically rerouting the money that would have gone to maybe a savings now into this. And then you're still going to go put it to use. And, that's another big part of the concept that some people I don't hear talk about a lot, is this idea that like a lot of the wealthiest people I've met keep their money in motion. So we're not talking about like, hey, open up this private banking system and park your money. It's like, no, keep it in motion. And the reason is inflation, right? I mean, I think they reported 6.8%. People I talk with that say if you use numbers from around 1980, when they were a little bit more accurate, it's probably double digit, but we don't have to get into that. So you got to keep your money in motion, because if it's just sitting there, you're losing, it's being devalued. And so I just wanted to throw that nuance in there, that really we talk about like motion is really like a law of God, right? And so your blood has to circulate for you to live. Your air has to flow in and out of your lungs for you to breathe. Water can't stagnate, it's got to move. So that's another key component to that system as well.
Nice. Never thought about that before, Drew. That stuff's always got to be moving.
That's Nelson Nash. I stole that from him. That's it in his book. So I can't claim it.
Nice. All right. So if I'm interested in setting something like this up, what do I need to do differently than just buying a whole life policy from a life insurance company?
Yeah. So most like life insurance agents don't really know infinite banking or how to set it up. And they might even tell you, oh yeah, I know a little bit about that. But there's actually a certification you can go through. Obviously I have that. I'm not, trying to say I'm better than other agents, but so there's a certification. So you want to look for someone that is qualified, knows how to set up, because I have worked with many people who've come to me and said, I have an infinite banking policy. And it turns out, no, they've got like, universal life or variable universal life. They can't take any loans on it for 5 years. And I had someone that had a term insurance policy that had this rider on it that made them think it was, infinite banking, but turns out really all it was, they just get their money back at the end of this term. And so there's a lot of people that will tell you, yeah, I know how to set that up. And even if you just need someone to lay eyes on it, look up, you go to the Nelson Nash Institute and you can look up someone near you that would help you. But you definitely want to make sure you're working with someone who knows how to set it up properly, because a lot of people really honestly don't. A lot in this industry really don't. And even at the insurance companies, some of them don't totally get the infinite banking thing.
So what are some of those things that you need to do? What does it mean to set it up properly?
Yeah, to set it up properly. So, you're gonna look to overfund it initially. You're gonna meet with someone who's gonna sit down, figure out, what are your goals? What are you trying to do with this? Then from there, and we teach about the infinite banking concept. And if it's something that you're interested in moving forward, we'll help, that person would help you get set up with the application, which sometimes involves a physical. Sometimes you don't have to, depending on how much you apply for. You want to figure out, your funding level. And like I mentioned, I don't want to get like too in the weeds on people, but you're going to want to overfund it for the first about 4 years so that you build up that cash value. And that's some of the nuances I learned, like, why Dave Ramsey, isn't a big whole life guy, because traditionally designed, it's really not great. I totally admit that. And that's why the first 4 years, you want to really get it overfunded and build that cash value up. And so you want to make sure they have something on there called a PUA rider. So those are a few of the, things that you'll need to know to get set up.
All right. So when we look at a whole life policy, it says, okay, I'm 40 years old. I have a $500,000 death benefit. That's going to spit out my premium. Say, okay, it's $500 a month. Great. when you say overfunded, that means we need to create a mechanism that allows me to put in, instead of $500 a month, which is what the policy is asking for, I want to put $1,000 a month in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, the way we design it, I would say, is we actually reverse engineer it. So it's backwards from, like, most insurance people are going to say, how much death benefit do you want? Okay, let's get that. And then we'll see what your premium is. So we're actually, because we're using it for banking and less about insurance, we're saying, how much do you want to put into your banking system first? Then we kind of tell you, okay, this is what your death benefit equals. Now, we do have people that come to us and they say, well, I want to switch from term to this because, I get all these benefits, but I still want to have this amount of coverage. So we do help people in that way. But really our focus is more on, like, helping, investors, business people, anybody really, to set this up with how much they want to get into their system. And then we kind of work backwards. So it's a little bit opposite of traditional insurance, but you are right that we say, okay, well, we're going to overfund it the first 4 years. So we need to make sure we're prepared for that. And then actually after that, your funding is about 40% of that number after that. So that's kind of the way we start and figure that out.
Got it. Yeah, it's super interesting that these policies are very customizable, flexible,
Mm-hmm.
sort of. Those are two terms you, I guess, could choose. Is there
Yeah.
a term that you use?
No, I think that's good. It's very much, flexible, to a limit, but yeah, so.
And that's a really important thing, because you don't want to break it, because you can break it, and that means you put too much money in, or you just do things the wrong way, and then you don't get the tax benefits anymore.
Yeah. And that's a huge component. And something like when you asked about getting it set up, the other key component I've left out is you want to be working with a mutual insurance company. That's a huge part of this process. And so I mentioned that because a really good mutual insurance company is going to tell you when you've reached that limit that you mentioned. It's called a MEC limit. And so they're going to say, hey, if you put this in, you're going to go over your MEC limit. This is going to become a taxable vehicle. Do you want to do that? And they're not going to let you do that without you knowing. But and the reason for that mutual insurance company is that, you are, for all intents and purposes, now a shareholder in the company, and you get the dividends as well. And so that's a key component I should have mentioned earlier as well.
Drew, you're going to drive over the cliff. You need to turn the wheel of the car.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks,
yes.
Mutual Insurance Company.
Thank you.
You have a sense of how many mutual insurance companies are out there doing business? Is it a lot? Is it few?
There are a lot. We only work with a few, but there are quite a few. Yep. And so, but we kind of try to tailor it to who's really infinite banking friendly, who's providing really good guaranteed, return, and also, who's been in business for years and years and years, and then customer service is a huge part. So that's another, because you're gonna be contacting them and talking with them or us about, taking a loan and all these things, and so you want to work with someone that's just, knows what they're talking about.
Who are some of your top carriers?
Yeah, so we work a lot with Emeritus, and then we also work with Lafayette Life. We can really work with anyone, but those are just a couple of the top two that we really typically work with.
Got it. Well, Drew, the people are ready for your difference-making tip. What do you have for them?
You know what? I would say for me, one of the things that has been just the most beneficial this past year, I guess we're in the new year now, is learning about the gap and the gain. It's a Dan Sullivan book. I've actually not, full disclosure, I haven't read the book. I was taught the concept. And it's been a huge game changer for me, because, basically the gap is measuring backwards with your life. So it's measuring, we'll just say, since we just hit the end of the year recently, you measure back at where you were at the start in January to where you were at the end of the year. The gap is where, and so that's the gain, is January to, to December. The gap is your vision of the future, where you want to be, which is, you're really always changing, right? Because as you grow, your vision changes and you realize, oh, I'm capable of more and more and more and more. And so if you live in the gap, always looking at where you want to be, it can lead to this feeling of not enough, and I should be doing this, and really feeling a lot of guilt, right? And so I have guys on our team who call me out all the time because I live in the gap, because I want to, get advance and further my career and further myself. And so I can constantly be there and be like, I'm not enough. I'm not measuring up. And it's great to have goals, great to have that vision. I'm not saying that, but you don't want to live in that space. You want to say, hey, let's measure back. Let's see, where was I a month ago? Where was I a week ago? And so for me, like with health and finances, it's like, I didn't hit all my goals in 2021, but when I measured back, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the best I've ever eaten and exercised in my life. Yeah, I have times where I fall off, but so that's that for me. That's something I've been sharing with a lot of people, because it really has helped me to start realizing, like, live in the gain. And there's one easy way you can do it. At the end of the day, is just write down 3 wins today, and then 3 wins for tomorrow. And that's a huge, way to help you to stay in the gain and see how did I win today? So.
Well, I think that is great stuff. That definitely gets it. Come on. Gotta live in the gain.
Yeah.
Excellent. Dan Sullivan is great. He's
I've
paid attention, enjoyed his work for a long time. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Drew, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you, and how can they engage with you?
Yeah. So if you go to my website, www.ibcdrew.com, which stands for Infinite Banking Concept Drew.com. Also, I'll give out my phone number on the podcast. It's 402-515-2692. So you can use that, or you can click to schedule a call with me, and I can tell you if we'd be a good fit or not, and go from there.
Excellent. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Drew your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Go to ibcdrew.com. It's ibcdrew.com, and check out the resources, hop on a call, and find out if y'all are a fit for one another. Thanks again, Drew.
Thank you, George.
And until next time, keep fighting the good fight. We are all in this together.